Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Hi, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
We have a couple of announcements to start this episode with. We're just going to call them announcements. First, you may have noticed that our title is just like The Topic and with Cindy and Alison. We obviously, we've reached more than 150 episodes right now, and we obviously are done with trying to come up with some sort of title. You can tell by our title for this episode. We decided, oh my gosh, I just can't keep doing this. Isn't there something we can do? So what you may see now are all or most or subtitles that just say, from this point forward, that just say The Topic, either with Cindy and Alison or Alison and Cindy. Maybe we'll flip that around. Who knows?
Yeah.
but I think that, once you have reached to the 150 episode mark, which we did with our last episode, that the world will forgive you for being maybe a little less creative with your titles. We also, thankfully, for all of you preschool peeps, I think that we have a large enough audience now that people will go, oh, they're just like quirky like that. And they won't be like, they won't be thinking something like, what is this? We have no idea. Let's not listen. So we're just going to roll with our lack of creativity, starting with this episode 151. It's a new era. We figure when we surpass 150 episodes, we can start a new era of the podcast. So that's what we're doing. Also, second announcement before we start talking about dramatic play is that we've had some drama going on with trying to record this episode. Allison has some internet drama, but rest assured the show will go on. Even if you're on YouTube and you see Allison totally freeze and look like some sort of still photograph, the show will go on.
The show will go on.
Yeah. So if Allison stops mid-sentence, I'll just pick it up. That's what, people who do things in partnership and teamwork do for each other.
Basically, apologies ahead of time for that.
There you have it. There you go.
Sorry, it happened. This is the real world, everyone. So we tried.
We always like to remind people we're just two people trying to put good information out in the world. We're not, let's face it.
Yeah,
we're
not
amateur professional podcasters. Okay.
Yeah.
So you know what? It's good to be like, nobody's perfect in a world that expects so much perfection.
That's true.
Okay, so dramatic play is actually the topic for today. Allison was telling me about some of the things that she has seen happening in the world with the reduction of dramatic play or the placement of dramatic play outside of classrooms. So why don't you go ahead and describe what we're talking about for people who may not be aware?
So I noticed that during COVID, especially, which made sense during COVID, I think, because you didn't want children sharing a lot of things. But I noticed during COVID that dramatic play was going bye-byes, and a lot of times it did not come back. And I've also worked at some childcare centers and seen other childcare centers that moved their dramatic play out of the classrooms, out of all of the classrooms, and put it into a shared group spot, like a basement, or a room that everyone shares, but then the children don't get dramatic play all the time in their classroom. They only get it when the basement or that room is available to them, which in the childcare center I worked at was only when it rained. It was like only when they couldn't go to the playground did they go into this basement, and then so maybe once a week, maybe once a month, they would get dramatic play time in the basement. And
so we're taking kids who might want to play with blocks and going, come, we're going to the basement. We're going to force you to dramatically play.
Yes.
Children should be choosing what they want to play.
Yes.
Really.
So now you have this entire room that's dedicated to dramatic play, which is fine. But what about the kid who doesn't want to do dramatic play? It's like you're forced into this room of like, now you're stuck doing this, whether you want to or not. And then the kid who might want to do dramatic play in the classroom doesn't get to do it because they're like, oh, but it's not time for us to go into that room. So you're like limiting this time. And I notice it's almost always dramatic play that gets moved out. You're not
That's
moving
so
blocks into a block
interesting.
room, like it's always dramatic play that gets moved out. It's like, that's the disposable center or something. And it's not.
Some people might say, oh, they must be moving dramatic play out and not blocks because blocks is more popular, but that's not true. They're equally popular in most early childhood classrooms.
I would find dramatic play is very, very popular.
It's very popular because that's the stage of development the children are at. And if we're going to get a little technical, and you can look for resources about theories and all on our website, but if we're going to get a little bit technical here, Jean Piaget taught us about the pre-operational stage of development, which is children at approximately age 2.5 to age 7 or 8. They're in the pre-operational phase, and it's in the pre-operational stage of cognitive development that young children use pretend play to understand their world. They do a lot of things while they're in dramatic play, and that's why dramatic play needs to be available to children every day, all the time, in the spaces in which they live, which would be their classroom, not some separate common room where we go sometimes. And the forcing thing is a whole other topic that maybe we do in another episode. What happens when we force children to pretend, when we force children to look at books, when we force children? So forcing can go right on your list, Alison, for future topics.
Writing it down now.
But, we're going to talk about the importance of dramatic play. Here's my perception about why people don't understand the importance. Adults, unless you are into acting, don't dramatically play anymore unless you act, and I think that what we start to do is we start to say, oh, I'm not an actor, that's that person. And as we get older, we relate less to the ability to get into that pretend world, because again, unless you are perfecting the craft of acting, you don't stay in a mental headspace where you can pretend like a young child does. So because adults, this is my belief anyway, because adults are distant from that sort of play, they don't value it. But it actually is some of the most valuable play that happens in early childhood. Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Fred Rogers, taught that it's through play that children practice the skills they've learned and have the opportunity to expand upon that ability. And it's absolutely right. If we don't give them a chance to dramatic play, there are so many skills that they will not practice. It's also through dramatic play and that area of a classroom that children unravel the world around them and try to understand it. We have to remember another thing Jean Piaget taught us, which is that children at this very young age are egocentric, which is an insult when you call an adult an egocentric. When I say an adult is egocentric, we're saying that they're selfish and self-centered and narcissistic and all that stuff. For a child, though, it's simply their worldview. And their worldview is only from their perspective. They can't take on the opinions of other people. They don't understand that other people could have a different opinion, though I have to say, I know a lot of adults like that too. But they
maybe that adult didn't get enough dramatic play when they were a kid.
Maybe. So they don't understand that you can have a different opinion. Not only can't they take your perspective, but they think everybody thinks exactly like them. And they see the world only from their own point of view and primarily only care about themselves. Is their egocentrism, which is a very important part of who they are because it helps to protect them from harm. It's not a bad thing, it just is. And then as we develop and grow, as our brains develop and we grow and we have experiences, we start to consider other people. Go ahead.
I was saying, but I think dramatic play is a large part of that development because they're very egocentric. They only see it through their eyes, but when they are in the dramatic play center, it's the beginning of them realizing like, oh, I can see what other people might see to play this role in dramatic play.
Right. Right.
It's the beginnings of it. So if you take that away from them, then they're missing this. They got to figure it out on their own, which is hard.
You know,
for
they
them.
they go home from our settings and they pretend to be us.
Yes.
I often, when I was still a teacher, parents would show me pictures of their children having set up stuffed animals or dolls or something, like it's a classroom, and the child imitating me, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
When, just so you know, when they come to our programs, family, they pretend to be you. They pretend to be their family members.
Yeah.
This is how we learn a lot about what happens in your household.
Yeah.
There are things we know because they act it out and they pretend to be you. And the vast majority of the time, it is wildly entertaining, not in a bad way, but in a really good way.
Yeah, in a good way.
So they come and they pretend to be you. And at around age 3.5, they are all crawling around the floor being their cat or their dog. And they come up, right? They come up and they pant at you and they sit back on, they sit like a dog or a cat.
Yeah.
And they want you to pet them. And adults get so annoyed by that, but it's
So true,
it's a part of normal development and typical development. And here's why. Because what they're doing is they're trying to figure out, what must it feel like to be as powerful as my teacher, the people raising me, my pet. And people are like, my pet. But here's why. Because your pet, or any pet that children are exposed to, the pet walks in the room, pants, looks cute, and everybody's like, hey, doggy. Everybody pays attention. That's power, right? Yeah. So what they're trying to figure out is, what must it be like to be as all-knowing, powerful, and wonderful as the people around them. Why do they pretend to be superheroes? Well, same reason. What must it feel like to be so all-knowing, all-powerful? What would it be to be grown up, to have magical powers? And remember that in this pre-operational phase, they also can't separate fantasy from reality. So those magical powers they believe could happen, even if it's not happening to them, they do 100% believe it can happen. Until they're exiting the pre-operational stage. So, which again is like 7 or 8 years old. So why does dramatic play matter? It's how they're figuring this all out. And as Alison said, it's the beginning of compassion and empathy.
Empathy. Yeah, they're trying to see the world through other people's eyes. They're trying to figure that out. What is it like to see the world through the eyes of a teacher? So let me pretend to be a teacher with all my stuffed animals. Like, I've even seen it where other children are like the kids at the meeting time, you know what I mean? And they're, even though they're being themselves, but they're like, they're trying to see the world through their teacher's eyes. They're trying to see the world through a firefighter's eyes, trying to see the world through a superhero's eyes. Like, they're trying to figure that out and what it's like. That's the beginning of empathy. That's the beginning of kindness and compassion. Like, you have to be able to see the world through another person's eyes to empathize with them.
And it's also, so they're trying to see the world, like you're saying, through another person's eyes, right? Yeah. It's something that we as adults do naturally. Again, this is a way of thinking that we're far removed from, hopefully, most of us, that I can sit here thinking about an occupation, a position in life, a person. I can sort of imagine things about that person and what it might be like to be in that person's shoes. And it's one of the reasons why, like, I will sit here saying, I would never want to be a politician. I've never been a politician, but here's why I would never want to be a politician. They are under a sort of pressure that I don't think I would operate well under.
That's true. I wouldn't want to be responsible for that many people's lives. That's just me. But
I also don't think that I have the sort of thinking process that is required of people considering legislation. And, there are things they do that I can understand might not be who I am. Young kids can't do that. So they're figuring out, who do I want to be in this world? Even more than what's it like to be the teacher? It's, who do I want to be in this world? If we look at the larger picture, right? Who do I want to be? And while they're doing that, and this is no small thing, they're laying the foundation for later reading comprehension skills, because here's what they're practicing. As they make up the story and talk to you and each other about the story of their play, that's narration. So they're practicing narration. They also use a great deal of language while they're playing dramatically. They build those skills. They use more language while playing dramatically than they do in any other area of the room, though they use language in all of them.
And all of them, but in dramatic play, they use it the most.
They use language the most. They also use negotiation skills. And that's another social emotional development piece to dramatic play. So other reading things though, if they are in the dramatic play area pretending to be, let's say, for sake of argument, they're pretending to be their parent. What they're doing is they are physically being the embodiment of a symbol. They are symbolizing what they've seen their family do and be and say. Right? I'm being this person here. They don't understand that that's symbolism, but it is. They are experimenting with symbolism, which leads to more of that sort of abstract thinking a little bit, where they can look at a shape and realize that that's a letter, and that letter stands for a sound that is not in the room. Kind of like I was pretending to be my mother who's not in the room. This letter can stand for a sound that I can't see in this room. And then when we put all these letters together, they form words, and those words stand for things that may not be in this room. So that whole, I'm going to be something that's not in this room, is a really important beginning small step for later reading skills. As they tell the story of their play, it's a way more natural way for children to add a plot or storyline than when we look at them with a book and say, what do you think is going to happen next? They're making up what's going to happen next.
They're making up what's happening next. Yes.
Which requires them to predict and foreshadow and think about the action around them. It's all the reading skills.
And it's the beginning of writing skills. Like in kindergarten, it was like, let's start a story. How do you start a story? You start it by telling it before you even write it down on paper. So you got to tell the story. You have to know where the story is going. And now we're going to put it down on paper. Now that you have all of those thoughts formulated in this cohesive manner, we are now going to put it down on paper. And now you have to put the words. That's what we did when I was teaching kindergarten last year. It was constantly like, what's your story going to be about? Nope, we're going to talk about it first. We would talk about it for days sometimes. This is the beginning of it right here, is the storytelling aspect. It's huge in the writing comprehension, the writing and the reading too. You're right.
Dramatic play, like I can't emphasize enough the importance of dramatic play. And the fact that it's being relegated to another room to do sometimes is not okay. The children need the outlet for this. How do we expect children to learn to negotiate with each other when they're never given the space to do that and make mistakes? That's another thing about the dramatic play area. This is a safe space for them to experiment with skills and not get them right and struggle. And then we go over, hopefully, and help them to understand how to do things. I also love that dramatic play inspires children to practice skills that you might see elsewhere in a classroom, for example. When children are playing restaurant is one example. You'll see them go over, get paper, get something to write with, and bring it over to the dramatic play area. And now they're taking orders like they're in a restaurant. So it has inspired their desire to write. I have seen children in dramatic play pretending to work in a store and well, they used to take money. Now they might just take credit cards and debit cards. I don't know.
But still.
But I've seen them talk about money and numbers. So the dramatic play area inspires them to do math.
They also, when you're doing as a story.
You're kind of frozen, Allison. I'm actually going to mute you until I see you moving.
Okay.
So that we don't have a lot of interference. Or it's not letting me, I don't know. may not be letting me. So I'll let you know when you're back.
Okay.
I think we have to think about the fact that there are some areas of the classroom that might inspire more of one content area than another. Like blocks inspires more math, physics, that sort of thing. Sometimes writing, but more math, physics. Writing might inspire not just the fine motor skills, but also creativity that you might see in a dramatic play area. But dramatic play crosses everything, in my experience, pretty equally. You seem to be back now, Allison. So let's see. What say you, Allison?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. I wanted to say that back when she was talking about the store setup, is I do feel like there's some math going on in there too with the sorting skills, because they will sort these products that they're selling into different categories, whether it's like they're selling flowers, let's sell all the red, orange, green, yellows, whatever, or let's put all the cans here. Like there's sorting skills going on there. There's math going on in there that you don't even realize is going on in there. There's a lot of stuff going on in that dramatic play that you don't realize is going on.
Right. And I'd like to say something perhaps a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not touchy. A little more debated. There's a word.
Okay, debatable. Ooh,
it's not even debatable. It's just a little more debated.
A little more heated.
A little more heated. All right, there we are. There we are. Thank
heated.
you. A little more heated of a topic having to do with dramatic play. As we mentioned, or as I mentioned earlier, the children are trying to figure out their world, the people around them, the viewpoints of other people to see through their eyes. And the dramatic play area is not determining anybody's sexuality. It's not the thing that someone's sexuality depends upon, how they play in a dramatic play area. And I hope that we get to a point in our world where people don't get so upset if they see children take on non-traditional gender roles in a dramatic play area, because they're just being who they want to be and what they're thinking about, and they're feeling free enough to express themselves in any way. That is a beautiful thing for a young child, and as a tool for developing self-worth and self-esteem. When we start to tell them that their thinking, that their imagination, that their creativity are not acceptable to us, is when they take it and stuff it away and don't use it anymore. And then they don't have that outlet for expression. The dramatic play area is also a place in which children can express and experiment with, even more importantly, experiment with emotions. And when we say to them, what you're doing right now is not okay, put it away and don't do that anymore.
Teaches them to always put it away.
You've taken that outlet away.
Yeah.
And again, it's not determining their sexuality.
Right.
That doesn't depend on your dramatic play area and your dress up clothes.
Yeah.
There are other things behind that. Though dress up clothes is one of the things, like you were saying, Allison, the pandemic has impacted our dramatic play areas. Dress up clothes, puppets, anything like that has been taken out because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of teachers bemoan that when I'm doing my consulting work and talk about how sparse their dramatic play area is. And this is what I tell them. And I hope makes them feel a little better about it. If you took a young child and you put them in an empty room, that child will pretend.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. The props don't matter as much as you think.
Sometimes with my dramatic play areas, I would take out all of that stuff. You know how you have like in the kitchen area, like the pretend food. I would take out all that pretend food and be like, no, you need to imagine what you are cooking. You have to imagine it. And then you would see it. It almost made them more free. They're like, oh, we're making like a cheeseburger pizza. Well, there's no fake food that's going to be, a cheeseburger pizza. Like, so it made it unlimited. Like it was like anything that could be in their mind, they could cook, and it was, I actually walked into a center once where there was no kitchen area, like
Oh.
those. Yeah. And I asked the teacher once, I was like, I don't see, a sink or a stove. She goes, no, I have these, she had these huge blocks. I mean, they were big. And she goes, they have to build it. They have to build
I
their own
love that.
kitchen in order to, and she goes, and so every single time they're in there, like if you wanted to pretend to be a restaurant, maybe you would have a bigger stove. So they
I
would build this
love
bigger stove.
that.
It was really awesome. Like, I was like, wow, that's putting it all on the kids, I mean, and in such a beautiful, wonderful way, it made it unlimited. Like they could build the biggest kitchen they want. They could build the biggest vet office they want. It's theirs. It's all in their head,
I was once in a classroom where they took milk cartons and the teacher helped the children to make an igloo, and that was their dramatic play area that week.
Yeah.
So they had, it was amazing, folks. It was an amazing piece of like, is that physics? I don't even know, but it was an amazing piece of architecture that this thing stood up the way it did.
Engineering. Yeah.
Yes, it was amazing. Yeah. They learned so much from doing that with their teacher. I've also seen settings that change what the dramatic play area is every month.
Yeah.
Here's a question that I'm going to throw out to you, preschool peeps. If you have an answer to it, or even some sort of educated guess or uneducated guess, I don't care. Just send me what you think. I'd love to know what you think. Why do the vast majority of dramatic play areas in early childhood settings have a kitchen? Yeah. And we're not going to answer it, Allison and I. We're throwing it to you, preschool peeps. Go to our contact form on howpreschoolteachersdoit.com or send us a message through Facebook. Our Facebook page is How Preschool Teachers Do It podcast. Send us the message as to why you think there's a kitchen in all these dramatic play areas, and we may read your answer on the podcast in the future, but you have to give us permission to do that. So please let us know if we can say your name, tell us where you're from, and we will share your best guess. That's what we'll call it. It's best guess time on the podcast. Your best guess as to why, guess. Your best guess as to why kitchens are the thing for dramatic play areas and not so much else. If you have dramatic play area ideas, also send them to us, because you may end up part of the feedback 5 that we do sometimes. When we get feedback that we think is particularly interesting and would give our listeners some new things to think about, we do our feedback 5. So you can focus it on dramatic play this time. And we're going to let you go, ponder that question, think about that, and we will catch you on a future episode of the podcast. Take care, preschool peeps.